It's 5 minutes after 10 o'clock. Welcome to Money Matters with Dr. Terrance Martin. Morning, Doc.
Hey, good morning, Jamster. How is everybody in the listening audience today? After our exhausting but entertaining music festival weekend.
Did you go?
Yeah, I went to all 3 nights. I did the White Sands Lounge, and I had a good time, except really for the last night where it was just completely oversold. But it kind of inspired today's show, at least the opening conversation, the Kickstarter. The main topic today is money management, mastering budgeting and saving. So it's going to be a broad topic, and that's while I'm in studio, the approach I want to take, just to go broad to start general conversations, get some feedback, and then go extremely granular in terms of just taking a 30,000 foot view, a bird's eye view, shall we speak. But before we even jump in today, I want to definitely touch base on recapping some of the things that we talked about last week. And this show, I want to thank everybody that viewed. We had over 1,000 views, at least on the platform that I saw. So that was really cool. And I did get some feedback. People sent in some potential topics. So thank you very much. Again, the point of this show is to help us to create a more financially educated public. And the only way we could do that is with your engagement. So thank you guys who watched and left comments and reached out. And I don't want this to be, even though, yes, I'm a PhD, I'm an academic, the goal is not to make it boring and robotic. I really want it to be meaningful and impactful, So last week we talked about the psychology of money, right? And basically that refers to how the study of how people's beliefs, behaviors, and feelings affect their financial decisions. And it seeks to understand the emotional and the mental factors that guide our money-related behaviors, things like our financial attitude. Where did that come from? We talked about our motivations, and how one thinks about money and how it impacts their spending, their savings, their investment patterns, etc. Emotional biases. I saw a lot of that last week on Facebook, where there was still so many arguments about the bi-monthly payment versus bi-weekly. I saw one young woman talking a lot about bi-weekly payments, and I'm like, that's not better for anybody, but it shows a clear general misunderstanding and emotional bias that's at the forefront of that. It also affects cognitive bias, the mental errors that caused by simplified information processing, which may lead us to make less than optimal financial decisions, and certain money scripts that we have growing up as a child. So we had that conversation. We talked about the importance of your money personality and how it affects us, and we went over some myths. So it was a really good conversation last week, and we'll definitely come back to this topic in a more focused way in the future. But even still, it still carries into even this week. We just had the St. Kitts Music Festival, and since today's topic is about budgeting and saving, Jamster, how many people do you think budgeted and saved for music festival?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's probably I mean, anecdotally I can't even take a stab at that. But I always thought it would be I remember doing a thought experiment one time where I was saying, wouldn't it be interesting if people just decided, okay, music festival, I want to go 3 nights, 135 times 3. Okay, so I'll put aside maybe 150 or $50 here on a kind of discipline building kind of drive, and say, okay, so by the time June at least or May, I might have the money for the tickets.
Might have the money for the tickets.
And then, okay, and you could even say, okay, the spending money, I'll just add that on top of that. It would be interesting to know how many people do that.
And that's at 135. So we saw the VIP and the VVIP experiences. We're talking about what, 540, and then with the VVIP 600 plus. So then it begs the question,
really?
that takes us from $450 or $400 thereabout to 18 roughly, right? Oh, and then and not just the men showed out with their fashion this time as well. It wasn't just the ladies. So then we talk about the clothing that goes into it, and the getting ready, and how much that costs. I mean, we have some beautiful people here. We have some really gorgeous and beautiful people here. And they went all out this weekend. And then it wasn't just those 3 nights. We had White Sands last night, where the VIP was 4 and the VVIP was 6. So, now we're up to 24, 25, plus maybe another $15 to $2,000 in clothes, makeup, shoes, whatever, hair, nails. So, music festival, has over the 25 years have gone from a $400 expense, more or less, to maybe, $5,000? So, and this is just coming 6 months after Carnival, where we've also seen increases in cost of participation significantly, and rightfully so. Everything is evolving and so on. But again, it then asks the question, how many people save for Carnival to join those bands, to be on the front line, to do Juve, to do the 20 fringe events that surround all these activities now, that all also now have VIPs and VIP experiences. So within 6 months, we have basically maybe $15,000 in spending. Okay, what's our average minimum wage here in St. Kitts?
I would say it might be about between $300 to $400 a week, maybe.
So if we could take $400 a week, and mind you, this is not definitely representative of everybody. It's just a thought experiment. That's what we're doing, right? So $1,200 a month times 12. The expenses between Carnival and music festival, if you want to immerse yourself in the luxurious aspect of the upper echelon, then that's more than minimum wage. Minimum wage at $1,200 for a year is about $14,400, and we just projected music festival may be upwards of 5, Carnival may be very somewhere close to it, and then you have all the other fringe benefits that happen between here and then, the fadeds, etc. And look, all these are rational choices. Nobody is knocking that. And so that's sort of the framing I want us to look at when we're talking about this concept of saving and budgeting, where we meet people where they are, because this is where, the attendance was massive. The attendance was massive. The attendance in the VIPs were sold out in all the events. So that really speaks towards...
How do you know?
Huh?
How do you know they were sold out?
Oh, I was right in there.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I was right in. I was in the Carambola White Sands Lounge, and overall, I would say I had a good experience.
Wow.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking overall, how much of us sit down and actually think these things out and incorporate it into our monthly plan, our monthly budget, and so on. And again, this isn't to knock anybody. It's just to start the conversation so that with 6 months left to Carnival, Sugar Mass, we could actually prepare for that, yeah? So if we have, say, in general, if we have to set up a savings agenda and we want to be in the front line of Lux or Ultra, we're looking at an approximate savings of about $500 a month. So can we find $500 a month in our budget, right? Do we have that miscellaneous? Do we have that flexibility to get us to where we are? And that's on the high end, right? That's like the front line, and you really want to go big. That doesn't include any other events. And obviously, it could be on the cheaper end, let's say $200-300 a month, or $200 a month for meals. Meals, they're always cheaper, with stuff. So that's sort of the conversation that I want us to have today. And I don't, because how I know the answer to the question I asked you, whether or not we save for these events? I haven't seen this for Music Festival yet, but we have a lot of financial products focused on specific time periods. Carnival loans, right?
Yeah, okay.
Things like that. You see what I'm saying?
That, yeah.
If we're in business, you just had a dynamic speaker on. He was exuberant. He was full of energy. And as a business owner, one thing you recognize, I'm not going to sell a product where there's no demand. Why is there demand? Right? People borrow money when their income or their spending surpasses income, right? Safe to say. So as a financial institution, I am going to offer a loan product in a period where I know people's spending will surpass their fixed incomes, or even their variable incomes if you work in retail. So that's how I could answer that question, right?
But you said that just said that. I mean, I know you didn't want to seem judgmental, right?
Not at all.
But is that rational though?
You know, it's not irrational because you see, over our life cycle, if you imagine from somebody from birth to, let's say, people die at age 70, 75, one thing that we hope is that our financial capital will increase over time, right? So somebody that's in their 20s, even their young 30s, it could be rational for us to have higher spending at younger ages if we know for certain that our incomes are going to be higher in the last 60% of life, right?
But trust me, I don't even think they're thinking about it that deeply.
Well,
They
maybe
just
not.
I want to go to I want to go music festival. I want to look fly, and I want to go now.
But that's why we're having this show, right?
Yeah.
To change
So
that perception that we could make people not be reactive but proactive when it comes to money. And so it could be rational. It's not irrational, right? You ever heard the saying, keeping up with the Joneses?
absolutely.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
heard that, right? You know where that
Yeah.
came from? There's an economist by the name of Duesenberry. He gave us the relative income hypothesis. It's about 300 words of math, 300 pages of math. And all we can sum it up to is people like to keep up with the Joneses, relative income hypothesis. I'm going to spend based on how my friend group spends. I'm going to spend based on how my family spends, my community spends, whoever we define our community as.
Even if it's not, and I come back again to the word, even if it's not rational.
Even if it's not rational. It might not be rational for you, but it could be rational for that person or somebody else, right? Again, if they foresee potential increases of income, like the young man that you just had here.
Yeah.
Based on the plans as he's laid out, I see potential increases of income. So it's rational for him to start the business because the business he said he wants to start is going to be extremely capital intensive, going to take a massive budget, and will need major savings for him to even operate and open his door, right? So that's rational, and that's going to give him joy. That's going to make him happy.
I mean, is it really rational? Let's use the carnival because I have anecdotal evidence of this.
Okay.
People will take loans to buy costuming for the bands. And these things could be 2,500. You know, is that rational? I mean,
again, it depends on the person. It's hard for us to. You see, I wouldn't do it. I personally wouldn't do it. I don't, but I have friends that would.
Okay, so not rational.
No, I've said I'm not paying money to walk down Bastille in hot sun. But at the same time, I would jump on a plane and fly to Latvia. Now, somebody may say, you're crazy. Why are you going to Eastern Europe when there's a war in Ukraine? It's so close, right? But for me, that was rational. So it really does depend, yeah? And it's a personal preference. And it goes back to what we talked about last week with the whole psychology of money and how we view these money and our money scripts, our behaviors, the things that we seem right. But to incorporate it now, we need to bring that within our savings and budgeting strategy. That's what I want first. Because, you see, the thing is, remember, a loan should be taken as long as it outlives the product or the event. A loan should be taken. It's completely rational to spend or go into debt for something if that, this is how we define good debt. For something that goes and outlives. If the loan outlives the product, it is rational, right? So now, it really goes back, it's good debt. I don't want to use the word rational because everybody has preferences and that's their preference. Now, if carnival is over like a couple of weeks.
I actually like the concept of
right?
good debt. Yeah, that makes
it's better good debt. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's somewhat not so good debt if we then just do that and then have to take a year or two to pay off something that lasted 2 weeks, right? But then again, the joy that you receive from it may propel you to be more productive for the upcoming year. So that's why I say you can't just say, hey, they're wrong, this person is right. That's the perception, because we need to realize that everybody is different and everybody will have a completely different approach in general. So that's our main topic for today, guys. Mastering budgeting and savings. So the goal is to give a little bit of tips. I'm going to start with savings because, look, we could talk about budget. But for us to, we need to have something to budget. So we start with, I want to start with savings. I want to make sure that we know what we have. And for us to save, we need to know our cash flows, right? For us to save, we need to know where we are starting from. So savings, in essence, is income not spent. So income could be income from work, income from, I don't like to include this, but it is defined as income, child support and alimony, income from government transfers, income from personal transfers, right? So all these could be defined as income, but savings comes from income not spent. Academically, we said deferred consumption, right? Which reminds me, the goal of a household and the framework for this show and everything that we talked about is to end with everybody listening being happy about their financial decisions. The goal of a household is to be happy. You either be happy by keeping up with the Joneses, or you be happy by pivoting and adjusting from the Joneses and doing what you need to do in your best interest. So it's money that, savings is money that you put aside to use in the future rather than spending it now. Simplified version. Now, savings, I remember during COVID, there was this big hoopla on social media, where old adages came up. Save for a rainy day, save for a rainy day. We saw so many people lost their income because of COVID and not being able to operate, especially those in the hospitality industry. And some got a lot of ridicule for that, which, some was unfounded. Who am I to judge anybody? But there was a lot of back and forth on social media about that. And we've grown up being taught to save. My grandmother was a Sunday school teacher right there in the Ponce Pasture area, and she encouraged savings among the young people in the community that went to her Sunday school. And again, I credit everything I am today because of her. So that's really where we start. It's good to save, but it's also bad to save. And when we talk about investments, I'm going to dig into that some more. It's great to save for goals that are short term, 3 to 6 months, or unexpected expenses. Unexpected expenses like your car breaking down, a random health emergency. An unexpected expense is not, I forgot my girlfriend's birthday. That's not an unexpected expense. So it's really good to save for that. But when we're talking about saving for a long-term goal, like I want to get a house in 5 years, I want to buy a car in 6 years, I want to retire in 20, 30 years, savings is not the way to do it. But we're going to dig into that. We're going to dig into that as the show progresses when we talk about investment and the whole inflation and the impact on inflation. And we might even touch on it today. So there are several reasons why individual households choose to save, like emergencies, just like what I talked about, these unexpected expenses. And that's one of the primary reasons why people will save. And this could be anything from losing your job like we saw during COVID. And so having an emergency fund, having 3 to 6 months of expenses that will not go away, your rent, right? Your groceries, your utilities, anything that allows you to be productive. Put that money, as a goal should be, right? Before we do anything else, even if we can't have to get short-term sacrifices, make short-term sacrifices, we should try to get at least 3 months of fixed expenses, things that we must spend on that allow us to continue to be productive and to make money in an account. Leave it alone. Do not have a debit card for it because you'll be tempted to touch it. Just put it aside. Put it aside. I used to have the recommendation of just 3 months. Now, after COVID, and we've seen the impact of COVID that lingered here for over 2 years, we need to get up to maybe 6, maybe 9, maybe 12 months, right? So if your rent is $900 a month, let's say $1,000 for rounded numbers. Your rent, because housing prices are crazy in St. Kitts. Anyway, if your rent goes up to $1,000, and then we do in 3 months, and utilities is about $300, electricity expensive too, so say $400 a month. Groceries is another $600. We're already at $2,000 a month. Mind you, we just said minimum wage is $1,200. We should have a topic on wages and wage deflation and stagnation. That would be fun. We could have the Ministry of Finance come in. I don't know. That would be a fun conversation.
That would be good. I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
where with which institutions do our best interest prospects lie? In other words, where would we get the best interest return for, especially
Credit unions.
Okay.
Because not only do you get the return on interest on the account, which typically is just below the inflation rate, or should be. I think right now it's around 2%. Yeah, that's what it should be. They say inflation on average is around 3%, because again, pegged to the US dollar. However, again, I think inflation is double digits in St. Kitts and Nevis. And even if I think could do the math, right? We could talk about the impact on inflation. But I think what credit unions do is not only give you the interest, but you're an owner, right? Once you start with a credit union, you become an owner, so you participate in dividends and stuff like that. Whereas if you open on a bank, you're not an owner. They're going to just give you the interest rate as compensation for using your deposits to make money on you.
What are the bank interest rates now at present compared to the credit unions?
I'm honestly not. I think I tried to do some research on that. I think that's something we know in the Caribbean. We can't really find data, but I think it's about 2%. And it should be across the board. But what difference is that at the end of the fiscal operating year, credit unions should deposit dividends into account based on the number of shares. So when you deposit money, you become like an owner of the credit union, right? Yeah. So it becomes really good in that sense. People also say for major life goals, children, not all of them are unexpected. Some people actually plan for that, or that dream vacation to Europe. And even carnival is a life goal for some people, playing mass, right? So by setting aside a little bit of money each month, like we suggested, they have these large expenses become more manageable.
And then you talked about the power of compound interest.
And the power of compound interest, especially over the long term, right? Psychologically, when people, I remember in December there was a problem. Not December, like when Ultra came out and said you have to pay 50% up front, whatever it was. It was more than usual. People were taken aback. How dare you? They're used to paying a small deposit, but again, the time frame was less. You see, here's the thing.
But then also, I was told that a lot of it was because of some of the stresses of the supply chain.
The supply chain problem that was still. Now
so
we went from COVID into the war in Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
So that really messed up the supply chain. All things were diverted to the Middle East area. But the point I wanted to make here is if you pay $100 a month towards something, right, for a year, it hurts a lot less than taking $1,200 at one time. It's the same amount of money. But psychologically, what we as individual humans, regular people, suffer from is something called loss aversion. We don't like to lose. And we view spending large sums of money as a loss, as a financial loss. Retirement is a long-term goal, and that's honestly something where I think in the country we need a better retirement framework, not just in St. Kitts and Nevis, in the entire Caribbean. And financial freedom, that's something I hear. What's your goal? Financial freedom. What does that even mean?
And I guess that also ties in with what I referenced last week about trying to inculcate a culture of investment, because I know that's how retirement portfolios get money. That's one of the things they use, right? Like in Canada, the what they call the RSPs, and in the 401ks.
Yeah, in the UK,
that.
In the US, and so on. Yeah, and no, you actually know we have those options here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and this ties in, especially because retirement is a life goal, and our retirement age on the civil service, I think it was increased to 60 now, 62, which is great, because it used to be 55, which is ludicrous. Somebody's in the prime of their life,
It was
right?
55?
It was
really?
55. My parents were forced out at 55, maybe a little bit older. But that was it for government, right? So then if you're 55 and you're leaving the civil service, you're living for another 25 years, with an improper pension system, your only thing left for you to survive is to work, and then and try to go back to that same level of income. Then another problem that we have too, with the whole savings and budgeting, and a major life goal is to build a house or to buy a house. Well, if housing prices are so high, people have to wait till in their late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s to get a house. Well, if you were a government worker back then, even now at 60, That's about 15 of a 30-year mortgage. So where's the other income? How are you going to pay the loan for the next 15 years, right? So it really goes back to being intentional about our savings and budgeting, and being focused going forward for these kind of things. And this whole concept of financial freedom, it's really to allow us to make life choices without being stressed. That's what financial freedom means. Financial freedom doesn't mean you don't have debt. So the richest people in the world are the most indebted people in the world, but they don't have financial stress. They don't have to worry about paying the bills next month, how I'm going to feed my kids, how I'm going to pay for the school, etc. So what all affects our savings, just real quickly? The savings rate, we just talked about that. Compound interest, which we're going to dig a lot more into. Remember, that's the eighth wonder of the world, the sexiest thing, even compared to our beautiful women here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Types of savings vehicles, we just alluded to that. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we have a pension plan from the government side, even some private businesses offer that. Then we have what the law provides for defined contribution plans, similar to the 401k and similar plans in Canada. However, there's very little transparency in the operating of these plans. There are about 5 companies in the country that offer them to their employees, and the major companies, I'm not going to call any name.
But why don't they?
It's an expense to employers without any sort of incentivization from the government. It's completely irrational for an employer. Yes, you love your employees.
Oh, it's employees. It's employers
employer
doing that.
sponsored.
It's not banks or like say the National Bank Trust Company or anything like that.
No. So typically when these accounts are established, if it's a defined benefit plan like what the government offers, the government bears the investment risk. So that's incorporated in the government's budgeting every year. Yeah. So the government takes on the risk. So when the market falls, blah blah blah, wherever they choose to invest this money, the government takes the responsibility. There's another side, and I think that's what most of our retirement system still is, even though we have the defined contribution, which is the side I prefer, where I'm responsible for my investment returns, but it gives me a lot more flexibility and a lot more transparency and choice. I don't want the government making no choices for me, because if anybody knows anything about government, they're never effective. They're never efficient in practice.
So we talked last week about, I think I mentioned to you last week, how I find that the ECSE, the stock exchange, doesn't seem very dynamic and so on. Are there any better prospects for the Caribbean, in the wider Caribbean?
We'll talk about that. You know what? I'm going to do next week's show broadly about investments, right? Because Jamaica, so we'll talk about investments, and we're going to dig a little bit deeper there, because it's a natural complement to this topic as well, of savings and budgeting, right? But real quickly, so those things all affect savings. The psychology of money affects our savings. How we understand our financial habits, our attitudes toward money can help us develop a saving habit. I had a poor habit towards savings, right? I hated it, and a lot of my friends did, right? Instant gratification versus delayed gratification and so on. So, and if you really don't know, you seek professional guidance. You seek people that do know. Talk to your banker. Talk to the person in the credit union. Talk to someone, a mentor, somebody in the community that has demonstrated that they have positive acumen with money. Don't go to the friends that are in the same boat as you if you want a different outcome, right? You have to look for people with difference in order to be different. And then when it comes to budgeting, the first thing I want to say about budgeting, I don't usually talk about budgeting. I wanted to get the local budget queen on as a guest, our farmer queen, Nikira, because she's big on budgeting. I delve deeper into the investment side. Oh, that gets me excited, yeah. But the first thing I want to comment about budgeting, though, is your budget is a matter of choice. Too often I hear people I talk to, I want to save $1,000 a month, $500 a month. But can you? Right? Can you do it? Do you know your cash flows? Do you recognize your income, your expenses? Do you know what's left over at the end of the month? Right? So when you force yourself, no, you should always pay yourself first. We should always, in our budgets, pay ourselves first, meaning we should always save first. Now, paying ourselves first, before you pay Skelec, before you pay water, put $5, $10, build a habit of paying yourself first right? And then we could tackle bigger things. But I really want to echo that the budget should really be your choice. It's your plan. It should not be chance. So even if you say 500, 1,000, 2,000, $2,500, whatever amount you want to save each month, it has to be practical for your budget. It cannot be too restrictive, right? Because the budget is supposed to provide you control over what you will own, where you will live, how you will live, the events you can go to or not go to. So we really want it to be our choice, and it has to be dynamic. It has to be doable for it to be successful, right? And your goals should be SMART. And we'll have a show on SMART goals. The young man that was here before, he started with a SMART-ish goal. He started by focusing on the specific and then being time-bound. But we need the other acronym elements, which it be measurable, achievable, and realistic. And, your budget should be zero sum. Every dollar should have a place. Every dollar should have a place. And you should track it. We should track it. And if it's not working for us, guess what? We change it. Because you see, a budget talks about the future. A budget is a plan for our future. A budget is a plan for our future. So if life happens to us, then we might need to change the budget. If you get a child, you need to change the budget. You have an unexpected expense. If you've depleted your emergency fund or you have not yet accumulated, we might have to change the budget.
Let me ask a question, quick question about, you mentioned, what is the best way, for example, to fund your children's tertiary education? I mean, how? I mean, well, that's just, I figured.
No.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Listen, at this point, doing anything, because we have a culture of not doing it at all. So right now, something is truly better than nothing. But I could tell you, it's not a savings account.
No.
It has to be an investment account. Because the inflation rate on education, not just in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, except you're lucky enough to get like a free scholarship, that's something we could talk about, is about 8%. So if we're saying that consumer prices, the prices that we see every day, grow at an annual rate of 3%, education cost is growing at a rate of almost 8%. It's 2.5 times the cost of prices. And then obviously we have currency conversions where it's almost 3-to-1 or 2-to-1, etc. in some cases. So it cannot be a savings account. You know why? Because if they're giving us a 2% interest and inflation is 8%, every year you save for your child's education in a saving account, you're losing 6% of purchasing power, right? So even though you're doing good, you're really hurting yourself or hurting the end goal. And this is where the professional guidance comes in, And no, all isn't lost. We can make changes, There are options there. When we talk about investments, there are options that we here in St. Kitts and Nevis have outside of the OECS, outside of St. Kitts and Nevis, to participate in the global economy when it comes to investing, and so on. So that becomes even much more important. So again, main takeaway, your budget has to work for you, right? And for us to get to the point of even having a budget, we need to know our income, we need to know our expenses, we need to set clear, achievable financial goals, right? And when we're creating that budget, what's my rent? What's my average utilities? What's my groceries? What are my variable expenses, like entertainment, like eating out, going to the movies? Men, you're trying to, go broke being a player, There are numerous budgeting techniques that we could use, but the simplest way, I grew up seeing people do, and we used to do this when they would have the little money bags, the little plastic bags. You ever traveled with the auntie or your mom or your parents where they would have an envelope for Sam's, an envelope for Cossuless, an envelope for this store or that store?
Really?
So the
that
envelope
extreme?
Yeah, people
Wow.
go really deep into buckets, which actually that's a behavioral bias called mental accounting that is not necessarily rational, to use your word, but because it's all one pocket of money, right? It's the same amount you're going to spend, but psychologically for some people, having that is their way of sticking to their budget. So when that's done, then that aspect of it is actually done. So that's one of the simplest methods where you allocate a certain amount for each category of spending. And if you go over in one category, you have to go under in the next. That's how we stick to a budget here. And you have to stick to it because once you set that budget, as much as it's your choice, you have to adhere to it for it to work. Short-term sacrifice could change somebody's whole financial position. Now, granted, somebody's going to ask at some point, how can I budget what I'm not making any money? You know, every time I give presentations in the Caribbean, I'm hear that all the time. I don't make enough money. How can I budget? I have enough just to get by. And I completely understand that sentiment because wages are stagnant in our regions, not just here. I could give you a quantified example why it's hard to stick to a budget. If we were, for example, to say, when I left St. Kitts 20 years ago, well, no, I didn't leave 20 years ago, I left 18 years ago. But one of my last jobs here, I was making $10.22 an hour. And if you know me, you know where I worked. I don't want to call nobody name. And let's assume, Jamster, that inflation is 3%, right? This is in 2003, I was making $10.22 an hour. Let's assume inflation is just 3%. Remember, inflation is prices increasing year over year. So for the last 20 years, we can average it out at 3%. How much do you think we need to be making today in order to afford the same amount of things that $10.22 was giving us in 2003? So in 2023, how much money do we need to make today? Because this is one of the reasons why people can't save. I'm not going to come out here and glorify and say, hey, go save, save, save. A lot of our people cannot save. And it's not their fault. Right? It's not their fault.
I would say maybe $16, $17.
You're almost dead on, bro. Mm-hmm. Dude, you're a mathematician genius. $18 and 45 cents.
Okay.
That's at 3%. Remember, that's what they tell us inflation is. I think that's a fast, right? Okay. So for me, I think, let's say inflation is, say, closer to 6%. Then that needs to be $32 an hour.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So somebody making $10.22 in 2003, if inflation really is, and based on the price changes I see here on an annualized basis, based on the social media posts I see where people complain about basic needs, and this ain't got nothing to do with the taxes at the port, right? This is just cost of goods sold in stores. I think that, I don't think it's 3. It's not that low. Over the past 20 years, somebody making $10.22 in 2003 to buy the same amount of goods today that we could have bought then needs to make $32.77 an hour. This is why we can't save. This is why a lot of people can't budget, right? I'm not going to be impractical. So then the other aspect of it too is then how do we make extra income? And you see it all around. People, the food businesses on the side, yet they have their full-time jobs. Or they hustling with social media marketing while working for another place, right? And but it leads to burnout. It leads to burnout. So I met a guy a couple of years ago who was doing the same job I was doing in 2003. I think I mentioned this last week. Making $10.22 in 2003. Met him maybe, let's say 2018, 2019. He was making $10.34. Right here.
No?
In the past, over 15 years, he was only making 13 cents or 12 cents more than I was in 2003 for the same job.
What?
So exactly how am I then to go as a financial expert coming in and with my big PowerPoints and my grand ideas, encourage a young man to save. Now, I'm going to go over the benefits of doing all these things, but we need to also discuss the practicality of it. And it's not practical. Unfortunately, given our environment that we're in right now. And this is what
And I can tell you, like, there's some things I regularly buy, and the jumps that I have seen in just a matter of
that's
months,
what I'm saying.
it's ridiculous.
And inflation is an annualized number. That's why it's hard to see 3% as the annualized number, even adjusting for all seasonality, etc., and the complicated formulas that they go beyond it. Is it really 3? No, I've seen some things stay the same. Like the Chinese chicken.
Some things have stayed the same.
Chinese chicken, true. Like the $5 that it went up to like
but
6.
It's like I was explaining to someone the other day. Like one of my pet peeves is that a lot of people are so surface level in the way they look at the way the world works.
Mm-hmm.
They don't realize how everything is interconnected. I was explaining to someone. I said one of the reasons the cooking oil has gone up so much, the war. I said Ukraine produces a lot of the raw material, like sunflower seeds. That's yellow in the flag, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of oils, grain, as you know, and a bunch of other things. And all of these things are affecting the price of, because cooking oil has gone up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is attributed to the war. Thank God the grain, like wheat, flour, and so hasn't really changed.
You haven't
much,
really seen that much, but we've also
good.
seen like the dollar bread no longer $1, right?
Exactly.
And the 10 cents bread no longer 10 cents. Yeah? So,
Exactly.
So even though the main products may not have gone in that much on world prices, definitely the cost of production has increased significantly. Yeah. So I it's really important that
and then the fuel, of course, because pipelines run through that region and all
of course. You see, we are price takers. We suffer from externalities. We're small. We're vulnerable to world shocks, and it's always been like this. It's not going to change. In my lifetime, I've seen it with the 2001, the attacks in New York, when we saw sharp decreases in tourism receipts. When there's a hurricane, we see the impact. We had the global pandemic. We saw the impact where our economy came to a halt. Okay, look, incomes are not going up. So how do what can we do to increase the ability to even save, the ability to even budget? We need to reduce our expenses. How do we reduce our expenses? Well, the variable expenses like the eating out, actually, cooking right now is not even as cheap. It's not even that much cheaper than eating out, because, again, you could get some ready-cooked food that could last you a couple meals for relatively good prices. But
what has always surprised me is how much Kitchens and divisions eat out. We eat out a lot. People eat out a lot. And even last night, I think the point should be made. It might be maybe about going off topic, but at music festival, I was actually pleasantly surprised that the mixed drinks didn't cost more. I mean, $15, $20.
I heard about those buckets.
Oh, I didn't even see that.
There was a reasonably good prices.
Yeah, I was
there.
really surprised. I said, because I mean, I went and I had a El Dorado with cranberry juice, and I was like, okay, that's probably going to be like $30. The guy said $15. I said,
I met this guy from New York that was very much happy about that, right? So even in that sense, though, right, then you compare it to the cost of the bottle, right? But there's a social element that you benefit from people that go out and participate or go to a bar, etc. And some people need that social element as well. So one of the things, last week I was asked a question about the use of the dividends from CBI, for example. For me, one of the ways which it could directly affect people's pocket, I've heard so many complaints about electricity in this country and electricity prices. And, the cost of solar panels have gone down significantly. So if we were to say, all right, if we know we're going to give people $500 a month, $500 every 6 months, up to $500, whatever the number is, so $1,000 a year if you've been working at least 10 years, are we going to do it for the foreseeable future? Let's say as long as this government is in power, 5 years. They brought it up. We don't know if a change in administration changes that option, right, with CBI. We don't know what's the impact on CBI globally going to be, because, we're one vote in the European Union away from losing it all. So let's say $5,000. Well, I think with some of our partners like the Taiwanese government and some of those, we could find ways to put solar panels on every roof. We find ways to put solar panels on every roof instead of people give, and then the impact, the savings. Because if you have a $400 a month bill, you have a $400 a month bill, that's $5,000 a year, right? Versus in 1 year, that's how much I'm going to save. That's how much my budget just increased. My spending power just increased.
But the other thing that goes with that, which I know is, probably exponentially more expensive than just the panels, is the storage, which is something I think some people should probably start looking towards, actually. Because when we were building, I was actually looking at a Tesla power wall. Seriously, that was something I was toying with, having the panels and getting a Tesla power wall, but then the cost,
Yeah.
So I said, why not?
But they're doing it in some other islands where then if you produce, we have sunshine majority of the year. If it's not raining, that means the sun is shining. And we could sell it back.
That is insane to me.
We could sell it back to to Skelec, and Skelec can then sell it to business, right? And take the strain off of the personal people. You increase spending by the average utility bill in the country, multiply it by the number of population. That's millions in production costs and GDP.
There are about 4 things we do in the Caribbean, to me, that make no sense logically. We get sunshine, which we don't harvest. We're not a swimming power. How are we not a swimming power? We're the track
our
and field
Special
power.
Olympics team won a couple medals. We need to celebrate them when they come back.
Most of us can't swim. Fish is expensive. When was the last time you had fish?
That one I don't understand.
I do not understand it.
Yeah,
I noticed most of them have to do it at the sea for some reason. But the sun thing, I always just shake my head. I go, why aren't we using the sun more? I actually spoke, and I'm not making this up, Terrance. I spoke to a government official one time, and you know what he told me? He said they see it as a loss in revenue. The reason why they don't incentivize people getting panels.
Listen, I'm not even going to touch that.
And I'm like, I was like, but that's ridiculous. How could you be losing money that you haven't collected?
Listen,
as that makes no sense.
That shows very limited vision, literally. So let's look.
I couldn't believe.
I
couldn't believe it.
For me, I just want to help my people save more. And because right now we can't control wage increases or salary increases, we're not on pace with inflation, we have to find ways to cut expenses. One of the easiest ways is to cut utility costs because it's easy to say eat out, but the cost of buying food is almost as expensive as eating out. So therefore, that's not practical. You can't reduce anything much more. They say, okay, well, don't go to this party. I agree.
But there's another overarching consideration, I think, with the eating out versus cooking home. If you're health conscious, you there's a lot to be said for quality of ingredients and knowing exactly what went into the meal, and because you know that you have situations where someone might. If you happen to be a fly in the wall in the kitchen, you'd be like, boy, I can't eat at this place. You know what I mean? So
no, you're definitely right there. I'm gluten-free. That's why Candice made the comment about with the cricket flour. I ate crickets in China. They were delicious, by the way. But I don't think I will have cricket flour. And I also don't think many people cook with it.
I don't know about that. Yeah.
But I've been in pain since I landed because gluten is pretty much a part of almost everything. And that was the only part of the VIP experience I didn't enjoy because they didn't cater for people with different dietary restrictions except vegan.
And granted, it probably doesn't make economic sense because the number of people is so small.
Actually, more people are gluten intolerant than they realize. They just don't know. They don't know what explains those body aches and pains, and it could be wheat. Because most of us, wheat is not natural to digest, right? But even still, when you find these things out, then your cost goes up because food then becomes much more expensive. Instead of all-purpose white flour, then you have expensive other types of flours, etc. I know we're running out of time, so just to wrap up quickly. But outside of that, it's really important that I think as our leaders should sit and find ways in which to practically impact us in any way. And it's not one administration versus the next. It should be all. And we have to find ways to increase our ability to save and our ability to budget without. I'm never going to grandstand and say yes. We have some people that do really well that could do that easily, and they have the majority of us that cannot.
But I really want you to spend. I know you said you're gonna do it, but I mean, you talked about the fact that, like, the thing to solve the, say, saving for your kids' education is, rather than saving, it's doing investing. So
Yeah.
I hope you're really gonna
So
give us
I
some
think next
education
week,
on that.
I want to do a show just quickly on debt, just so in terms of the order which we experience life, right? We're more used to debt. So next week's show is about debt, consumer debt, and then the following week I'll do investing and savings. And then I think I leave after that, and then I have to work out how we're gonna do
The
these
Zoom
virtual
thing or
shows. We'll
whatever,
probably
yeah.
do Zoom,
Yeah.
and hopefully it works out, because I'm enjoying this, and I really want to have dialogue, and then we'll think more about what types of guests and stuff that we'll have. Now, there's so many. Everybody has individual success that we can have. We saw a young man in here that was so motivated based on a life experience that he just had, that he is going to incorporate it in his business. That's a sign of success. I have a friend who, she sacrificed. She realized she was grilling in Cayon. She used to grill on the side of the road. She started with one grill, and she realized, man, I want to expand. So she started saving. She stopped going out, and she saved her money. Man, she has 2 kids, right? And she built up her own little bar area. She went from 1 grill. Now she has 3 grills. She has a bar. She has a sitting area, and she's progressing. And I know, I've seen her struggle. I've seen the work that she put in. So for me, that's a definition of a success story, and young entrepreneurs like that, I always offer my services. There's a young nurse that, I had the ability to consult with, and she was doing makeup, and we sat down and we talked about how she could, without increasing cost drastically, what was she putting into her service that was costing her money, again, to increase the ability for her to save, right? Or reinvest into her company. And I've seen it. She's doing better. Again, that's elements of success stories when it comes to saving and budgeting. We have to be diligent and intentional when we go through these things and go through these types of exercises. So, look, to wrap up, just real quickly, I am not going to grandstand. It's easy to say create a budget. It's easy to say save. But the reality is wages and salaries in this country has not afforded our people to save how they want to. I'm not saying that some of us don't waste money. I've seen it. That's part of it. And even though some of us waste money, it could be practical. It could be what makes us not waste money, spend money on things that others may see as wasteful, for example. It could be what that person needs to continue to be productive in society. So overall, I really want people to know that set your goals, try to create your budget, stick to your budget. And as a practical tip, there's an app called Blue Coins. There's an app called Blue Coins, BLUECOINS. And if I could bring these types of technologies to you, I'll encourage it. So there's Blue Coins. Download the app, take the time to set your expenses, set your income, and get things started. Start to track stuff, and you'll see the dashboard. Some of us are visual learners. So once again, hey, I'm Dr. Terrance Martin. Next week, we're going to talk about debt, understanding, managing, and overcoming. It's going to be high level again. And thank you for tuning in. Remember, it takes financial knowledge to know that you're making financial mistakes. This is Money Matters here on WINN FM 98.9. Have a great day.
Great. You have a great day as well. So Money Matters returns next Monday, and the doc will be back in the hot seat.